Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. You knew that because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. And you know what? Today, the name of the game is a potpourri episode. An episode where we just dive into whatever the hell we want. Now, if you looked at the thumbnail of today's episode, and if you looked at the title, you'll know that the intention is to get into Michkovmania, running wild, Oliver Voorhees, brother. The Sixers, would they possibly move to Camden? There's a new rendering of what an arena could look like. We'll get to that. If you looked at the thumbnail, you'll see Big Dom DeSandro met Conor McGregor. Why the hell was Conor McGregor in Philly last night? We still don't have a full answer. So that's also potentially on the table. And of course, if you watched Thursday Night Football, or even if you didn't, you will have likely learned by now that Tua Tagovailoa had one hell of a hit that he kind of, in a way, initiated himself. Appeared to have given himself yet another concussion. And there are now questions this morning about whether or not he's going to retire from the NFL. But before we get into all of that, which, by the way, we will get into, I want to go out to the people who tune in live every Tuesday and Friday here on the Russ Joy Show. I will also point out that we were relatively on time today. I set the stream for 8:40 instead of 8:30, and we were A-okay. We'll go out to the comments, and then we're going to dive into today's episode. My computer feels like it's about to have a meltdown. It is just laggy as anything. So hopefully everything comes across okay. And if it doesn't, I don't know. There's not a whole lot I can do. All right, here we go. Checking in. Mike Loggia over on YouTube says, what up? Andrew Fawcett with a happy Friday. HC with a what's up? And Andrew Fawcett also saying greetings to everyone. Let's get through what we have to get through to today, okay? And, Andrew asks if I need him to grab anything from Buc-ee's. Andrew, you going to be coming up to another Flyers game? Because if so, I might take you up on a Buc-ee's offer. As we all know, I'm now a sucker for Buc-ee's. I go there one time. I went one time, went in the summer, and now all of a sudden, I am a devout believer. I don't pray at the altar of Buc-ee's, but this little fella right here, this Buc-ee's bobblehead, has become the favorite in the house. And, I have a certain love and admiration for Buc-ee's. But let's get into a few things that have to do with Philly sports, a couple of things that might not. And honestly, today's show might not be nearly as long as normal because we're in a period of stasis here. We're in a holding pattern. The Eagles don't play on Sunday. They play on Monday night. Obviously, that game is going to be massive potentially. We know that Bill Belichick has said he will be in attendance. Leave it to, shit stirrers like me to say, oh, is Bill Belichick out there, potentially scouting the next team will take over your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles? Remains to be seen. On Thursday, on Crossing Broadcast, I joined Kevin Kincaid and Rob Motti, who now is the AP's NFL reporter. And Rob said that he doesn't see a scenario where Belichick would ever take over mid-season, whether it's in Philly, whether it's in Dallas. So I live in this weird dual existence where on one hand, I love the idea of Bill Belichick coming in and taking over the Eagles. And on the other, I would much rather just see the Eagles be successful. And I do feel like Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore are going to probably drag Nick Sirianni into the playoffs. I still don't exactly know what it is that Nick Sirianni does, but we're not going to dive too much into the matchup against Atlanta today because, in fairness, it's a few days away. We'll do more of a recap on Tuesday. It'll be the beauty of doing a Tuesday show is that we'll be able to actually come here on a Tuesday morning and break down the prior night's game. I will just say really quickly before we get into the rest of the show, if we want to focus on the Eagles here for a second, Kirk Cousins looked absolutely dreadful in week one. It looked like he has little to no mobility left. And, there were jokes when the Falcons signed him that it was far too big of a contract. And then they went out and they drafted another quarterback anyway. Kirk Cousins just doesn't look very good. The Eagles have often had success against him, whether it was in Washington, in Minnesota. So now I think that they stand to eat in a big way. I think they're going to wreak absolute havoc on Kirk Cousins on Monday. And I'm going to be interested to see if the pass rush is something that's going to show up in a big, meaningful way for them. They didn't get a ton of sacks, right? They didn't have the greatest pressure in the passing game. We'll see what that looks like on Monday. And then Tuesday, we'll break it all down. I expect the Eagles offense to just soar. I expect them to put up 35 plus points against the Falcons. I don't think it's going to be a particularly close game. But again, we'll talk about that on Tuesday. We'll have some actual reactions. I said to you guys last week, it was last week, and even I think on Tuesday's show, don't take too much away from the Green Bay game. You have to see what this looks like over a few. They're going to be back on an actual NFL field. They'll have better traction. Let's get a better feel for what this team is. So that's your Eagles point for today on a Friday. I guess let's stick in football really quick. We'll go with the other non-Philly topic because I feel like the Michkov thing is going to take a good chunk of today's show. Just really quick. Last night, everybody was excited about this potential showdown between two teams that could meet in the AFC playoffs. You had Miami, you had Buffalo. They both won in week one. Miami's win was kind of overshadowed by the Tyreek Hill arrest going into that week one matchup. It was a weird game. Buffalo kind of had their way. Miami looked really, really just out of it. Tua did not look particularly good for much of the game. And it looked like, not exactly the same scenario as what happened in the Eagles game with Jordan Love getting hurt at the end. But it was just like one of those things where it's like Miami's down 21 late. And then Tua, for whatever reason, he doesn't slide. He goes and he tries to dive to pick up some extra yardage. And in doing so, kind of tucks his head and it smashes into the chest of Damar Hamlin. If you want to talk about irony, there it is. Two of the things, I saw a tweet and it seemed kind of insensitive, but the idea behind it's kind of accurate. It was two of the things that you're most concerned about. The tweet said two of the most fragile things in the NFL. Two of the things that you'd be concerned about, right? Tua's head, Damar Hamlin's chest. They collide. And Tua immediately is on his back. Right arm comes up in a fist. He's fencing, right? It's exactly like what happened in 2022, where he had 2 reported concussions. There is that belief that he had 3 that season. There has to be. I mean, there already is the question. And obviously, because the show goes as early as it does, not listen to the total discourse around it. Listen to some of the post game last night. Was on Twitter early this morning, just trying to get a better feel for where all the national pundits are at. But the belief right now is Tua actually has to consider retiring. I mean, whether you want to say it's 3 concussions in 3 years or 4 concussions in 3 years that we're at least aware of, they said within 6 minutes they knew he was concussed last night. I think all of us who watched that game or even saw the highlight, you realize, yeah, he's concussed. You know that within seconds. It's a really scary situation. And if you're Miami, you've put so much into that team and trying to be a team that can compete in the AFC. Last night, like I mentioned, is kind of like a potential playoff matchup against Buffalo. There's a case to be made that if something were to go wrong with Kansas City this season, that there is a scenario where you could have maybe seen Miami versus Buffalo in the AFC Championship game. That whole thing, it's all cast aside now. And if you're Miami, you have to have a serious conversation about Tua the human being. Sure, he can get paid. He got a massive contract in 2023. He earned it, right? Led the league in passing. He looked fantastic. You started to think, man, okay, if the concussion issues that he had in 22 are now behind him, and he's going to play a safer style of game, and if he's going to be able to avoid real head contact, then he's okay. Now, there have been questions out there about why he's not wearing the Guardian cap, which is supposed to be additional protection. Could we maybe see him try that? But they're in a very weird place right now. Not only the Dolphins, but the NFL as a whole. Everyone is cued in on what's happening with Tua. Everyone sees what's happening. And there's a legitimate concern about what is going to happen next. They can't possibly put him back out there next week. They probably shouldn't put him out for a few. And then you have the question of if it happens again, if he comes back, say it's week 6 or week 8, he returns. We have no idea what Miami's going to look like at that point. Will they be able to kind of tread water? Will they fall out of it completely? If by week 6, week 8, he comes back and he gets another concussion, that has to be it. At what point as a league, as a team, as human beings, do you look at this guy and say all right, yeah, you paid him a lot of money, but this is a totally different circumstance. This isn't somebody who tweaked a calf or something. This isn't somebody who, is actively trying to avoid work. This isn't somebody who has horrible allegations against him like Deshaun Watson has had. Like this is like a human being who is on a one-way course right now with significant brain damage. And at some point they have to have that conversation about like, do you move on? Like, you can't force him to retire, but can you get through to him that this isn't worth it? Yes, you worked your whole career for this. You worked your whole life for it, but like this isn't worth it. You're not going to live to 40 in a healthy way if this kind of thing keeps happening. It's a really weird position. And like, I don't know what the right answer is. What I can tell you is like, from a human standpoint, I think he should be done. I think he should retire. I think last night is kind of like the last one that you can sustain. Now, I mentioned the Guardian cap. Is it possible that he comes back later this season and the Dolphins say, you've got to wear the Guardian cap? You have to have every bit of protection. But if it happens again, that's it. Like, they can't tell him you're not allowed to run. They can't tell him you're not allowed to dive for first downs. He's a football player. He's played the same way his whole life. You can't like beat that out of him, right? You can't just talk that out of him. I don't know what the answer is. But from a human level, you have to be concerned with it. I don't know if there's ever been a player, or if there's been a player in like the last 5-10 years that I can think of, that there have been this many concussions, high profile concussions, and the same sort of discourse around like, how long can this guy actually do this? Back in 2022, like, it was one of the top stories in the NFL. Like, we all learned a lot about fencing because of Tua, because of the idea that he rushed back from a concussion. Like, it's scary stuff. And especially in a world where like you learn more and more about CTE and you learn more and more about the long-term effects of concussions and brain damage. I don't know how the NFL allows this to keep happening. Like, I don't know how they would allow him to come back. I'm going to go out to the comments and then we're going to move on back to some Philly stuff. But I wanted to make sure that we got to that because that's obviously like the big news this morning. It's crazy. And I hope the guy is okay. I hope that people in his life are able to convince him, if he needs the convincing, that like there is so much more to life than football. Maybe he becomes like the next level advocate for player safety, for youth safety in football. Like maybe that's what this is going to take. Like maybe they do need somebody to walk away from the game early. I don't know. We're going to go over to the comments real quick and then we'll continue. Chris Freed says, should the Lindros family reach out to Tua for a meeting to discuss concussions and life? I don't know. I mean, it's obviously not exactly the same, right? Like they're totally different sports. But like, if you want to talk about like the long-term impact of concussions, like a Keith Primo is another guy who's done a lot of work in that field who I'm sure would probably be open to having a conversation. I think a lot of times in sports, though, a lot of athletes want to talk to somebody who's lived the same life in the same sport. That doesn't mean that you discount what somebody else has gone through in another sport, but like, I don't know if there's exactly the same kind of connection there. Sean C says, Tua has been one hit away for maybe a year and a half, and it wasn't even a hit that possibly does it. Yeah, like it was, like I said, he kind of tucked his head, and he sort of, I don't know if he initiated the contact, but like he slams into Damar Hamlin's chest, and like that, and then he's out, and it's a bad look. It just is. Like the fencing part of it, I think, is what, like, I don't know if we become desensitized to it. I remember in 2022 when we first saw him go down and like the hands kind of started to do this, right, where they started curling up. It was like such a jarring image because we weren't used to seeing that. Like I think prior to that, a lot of times when people got concussed, you would think about them just kind of being knocked out and just not moving. And then like when they get up or they give the thumbs up and they get stretchered out, everybody's happy, you know, like there's a good sign. But I think Tua was really the first one where we saw that kind of like level of scary fencing. And that was the thing that like kind of added that to the public, I keep going back to the word discourse, but it really is. And started getting added into the vernacular of the way that people talked about concussions and they talked about them in sports. Let's see. Andrew Fawcett says Tua took some horrible shots a couple years ago. Should have considered retiring then. That's what I'm saying. But then, you know, the counter to that, Andrew, is that in 2023, because he played so well, he played himself into a contract that I think paid him $130 million plus guaranteed. So you run the risk reward, and he didn't have any of these issues in 23. So again, like you probably hoped it was behind him. There's a real case to be made here. I mean, I know that guys who work their entire lives to make it to this level, they don't want to give it up because you work your ass off for it. But like, if he has 100 million guaranteed, or he even has like 15 million, I mean, it's more than that, but like in the bank or guaranteed to him, I'm taking that money. I'm going to do advocacy work. I'll do philanthropic work. I'll still work with the NFL, could still work with the Dolphins, but like, I wouldn't want to scramble my brain. But that's me. I've never reached the pinnacle of anything in that same way. So it's easy for me to say. But at the same time, like, you want to live a long and healthy life, and he can't keep taking these hits. Let's see. There are more things over here. Andrew also notes that Recky's father-in-law is a prominent neurologist who studied concussions. Andrew says that Tua is 26 with a wife and 2 young children. That should be the thing that like gets him to stop. Honestly. Sean C says Paul Kariya is somebody who comes to mind. Similar build to Tua. Was so bitter about how the NHL viewed concussions. He wanted nothing to do with the league for years. These are all good points. All very good points. All right. All the best to Tua. We wish him the best here at the Russ Joy Show. Not that he needs it, but we will wish him the best from here. And we hope that everything turns out okay for him. And that if he does come back, he comes back when he's fully healed and ready to come back and not a minute sooner. Okay. Now that's out of the way. Let's talk about the thing that actually is sweeping the nation, and that is Michkovmania. Because, folks, we've talked about it for months. What happens when Matvei Michkov arrives in these United States of America? What's it going to look like? And are people going to have realistic expectations? Well, the answer is it looks great. And no one's going to have realistic expectations. It was announced on Thursday that Michkov will be suiting up. He will be playing in the rookie game against the Rangers on Friday night, which will be streamed on the Flyers site. I can confirm that. I think they've now finally put it out. I reached out to the Flyers. You know, you would think that with a partnered podcast between Snow the Goalie and the Flyers, that they would have proactively reached out to us about, you guys want to do something for it? We're going to be streaming it. Can you guys get the word out? Nope, nothing. We have to have a chat with these Philadelphia Flyers and figure out what we're doing here. Because I can tell you, I had plans tonight. Bundy had plans and has a wedding in a week. But like, I think there's some fun stuff to be done around Michkov's first game. They have Jason Murtias and Brian Smith on the call. They're going to stream the game. I think we have a big old fat missed opportunity here, which I think I've already kind of started to express to some of the fine folks over there. But I will make sure that I express that to a few more. It's just a weird thing. It's the first time the kid's going to suit up. And we legitimately had people up into yesterday asking, are they streaming the game? How this team continues to just miss the boat with communication around the most hyped prospect in a decade, I don't know. I just don't get it. But hey, once the season starts up and we're down there doing the press row show, guess what? Communication is going to be great, and it better be, and it needs to be, and we will be the conduit between the fans and the team. But again, kind of weird to not cover it. Kind of weird that they don't have it going through like NBC Sports Philly Plus. I don't know if it's just a rights issue, but like you would think that given the amount of people who are going to want to pay attention to that game, who are going to want to watch that game, who are going to want to see Michkov, along with some of the other prospects, you would think that there would be a little bit more, not fanfare, but just like a little bit more of an outreach to the fans, an easy way to watch it. And I'm sorry, but like watching it through your website isn't the way to go. Nobody gives a shit. I mean, some people will, but like the idea of pulling up PhiladelphiaFlyers.com or Flyers.nhl.com, that ain't it. Maybe they'll stream it on YouTube. I don't know. They just said through the website, streaming through the website. I don't know what that means. Will they stream it on their Twitter account? I don't know. Again, you think that they would have put that out? I guess we'll find out. Now, I do want to pull up a few of the things that were interesting about Michkov at camp, because there are some clips that were going around, and he looked fantastic. I mean, it is just camp, right? It's just camp. But I'm going to throw this over to Travis Ballinghoff is the one who's been taking a bunch of videos down at camp, which actually makes me realize the need for intern Andrew to go down there, for somebody else to go down there on behalf of Snow the goalie and start getting some video. Now, again, I don't know if these videos are going to come through well because my computer's having a meltdown, but we're going to try anyway. Has absolute balls. He pulled off in Michigan ahead of, or in front of, John Tortorella and the coaching staff, which apparently had Torts looking to his coaching staff up on the balcony. But we're gonna throw it over here real quick because it's a gutsy play, and it's a gutsy thing to do on the first day of rookie camp, and it's a gutsy thing to do on the first day of rookie camp in front of Torts. But here you go. Here's a look at Matvei Michkov as a Flyer at rookie camp. Off his stick. You could say bummer, but then he gets back in front of the net. Now, there were a few things that were very interesting, and this isn't the only clip. We're going to make sure that we go back to a few others. But, like, again, you look at it and you say, like, is it ballsy to try this? I would argue it is. Let's go, though, because there was something actually kind of cool that came out of camp yesterday. There was, like, another interesting, cool thing that happened. He talked about being with Jet Lachenko, who has had, a mixed reaction, was viewed by many to be a stretch where the Flyers took him in the first round of the draft. Here is him setting up. This is Michkov setting up Zayd Wisdom. So if you're looking for a Zayd Wisdom surfacing and appearance, this was it. Michkov makes a great move here. Nice little pirouette, no look past the far post. Wisdom can't bury it, but still a fantastic first time. Now look, my good friends Bundy and Anthony, they constantly get on me about, you can't overhype a kid in camp. You shouldn't overhype a kid in camp. They aren't as into the play-by-play. They're not as into the everyday movements of Matvei Michkov. I simply come back to the fact that, like, it's the most exciting thing that this team has had in a decade. So, like, I'm in. I'm 100% in on it. That's just where I'm at. Like, I think that if you're a Flyers fan, and by all means, please let me know in the comments what your thoughts are right now about Michkov and about if he's being overrated by people. But, like, I don't remember there being a player in the last 10 years that we've been this excited about. There was excitement around Nolan Patrick, but I don't know if it was at the same level. And that, by the way, isn't to go back and do revisionist history and say that, like, people weren't excited about Nolan Patrick. They were. He was viewed as the number one pick who fell to number two, and you felt like you really benefited by it. Turns out his career gets cut short by concussions. And so you never actually got to see the best of Nolan Patrick. There were questions about his motor. Michkov, on the other hand, there are no such questions. And he's viewed, I think, as a more dynamic player than Patrick. Let's go to this one, though. This is another one. Michkov sets up a goal for Jet Lachenko. A nice little poke. And there's Jet. So in the after practice, there's a press conference. And Michkov is asked about what it's like to be a Flyer, what it's like to be at practice with his teammates, what he thinks of some of the guys that he was playing with. And there was a nice little moment where Michkov will let a couple of words out in English, right? He's still answering most of the question in Russian, but there's a little bit of an effort, right? Like he said, unbelievable, I believe, when talking about Lachenko. He used a few other lines that were like solid enough lines. Now, as the resident linguist here, as the resident polyglot, let me just point out to people, English, not the easiest language. The benefit that you have if you're a player is that the kinds of questions that you're going to be asked by the media are so similar that even at a low conversational fluency level, you're still going to be able to understand the question relatively quickly. Like if the tutor's doing a good job, which it appears this tutor who's been working with him has been doing a good job. It's their job after all. There are like certain things that you can listen for as you're acquiring a new language that you might not understand every bit of it, but you can piece enough of it together that you can then kind of go to an answer in your head that's sort of rehearsed. And that's just like a basic strategy. That's a very basic conversational strategy. It's something as simple as like you're going on a trip to the Dominican Republic and you used to get those like little guides where they give you the sentences and everything for you to kind of learn, right? Or you'd like download Pimsleur or something, or like now you can like have Babbel or whatever other app. And like, what's one of the first things? And I'm going to do this in bad Spanish, right? Donde está el baño? And why? Why do you care? Because you want to know where the bathroom is. So you learn that sentence for yourself. You learn that question. Now, if the person comes back to you and they give you very elaborate instructions, then you have no idea what's going on. But the idea is you want to at least have a couple of things that you know. Una cerveza, por favor. Does it sound great? No. Is it really perfect in any way? Absolutely not. Are you making an effort? Sure. So in the case of Michkov, he's actively trying to make sure that he can communicate with the media, at least on some level. And I think that it's probably been explained to him. But like those little efforts don't just mean something to the media. They mean something, especially to the fans. The fans who want to see, not that you're assimilating into the culture, not that you're trying to learn the language. It's almost like in a way, it's a love letter to the fans that like you are actively trying to work on this and figure out a way to communicate with the fans. Now, he's been doing some autograph signings. There was one in a mall last week. And then there was somebody who tagged Snow the goalie yesterday and said that after practice, he was one of the last guys off the ice. And then he ended up signing a bunch of autographs. I'll go to this really quick because BJ just brought something up that I do agree with. Sports is entertainment. Let me be entertained. And the sports is entertainment part of it is like, there is a certain level to this where you do have to kind of go that extra mile. And if you aren't comfortable with the language, there are still ways that you can show that you appreciate the fans. The autograph signings are one of them. I will tell you, Michkov is known for a while that he was going to eventually make his way over here. It stands to reason that he's been trying to work on English for a little bit, at the very least. It could be something as passive as low commitment as like a Babbel, right? But I don't think he came over here having never listened to English or having never worked on English at all. But I think what you are seeing is he's taking strides. Now, will he be on Snow the goalie? It's funny. We had a conversation about this because we want to get back into doing some of the actual player interviews, like the longer ones. And there was a bit of a disagreement between me and Ant because Ant was like, well, you can't, like, why would you have Michkov on? You're going to be talking to the translator the whole time. And I said, because it's more about like, you have Michkov on the show. There are ways to get some answers out of him that like he'll kind of have an idea of ahead of time because like he'll be working with that translator. And again, it all comes down to fluency. Now, if this is all boring to you, you can let me know in the comments, but like, this is just how my multilingual brain kind of functions. I think it's a really good sign. And if nothing else, you let the talking on the ice be your play. And what he's put on, the little show that he put on yesterday in practice is enough to kind of light Flyers Twitter on fire in a good way. And whatever we see tonight between the Flyers and Rangers in this rookie game, chances are there's going to be at least one highlight reel play by Matvei Michkov. And it's going to be the kind of thing that's going to get people excited. There are other guys that you have to have an eye on. Jet Lashenko is one of them. Like if there's a scenario here where the Flyers feel like Jet Lashenko is going to be ready, I mean, like he'll probably get 9 games at the start of the year if he plays really well in camp, right? Like there's a possibility that they say, you know what? We want to have Jet and Michkov together. Like we think that they are a significant part of our future. This isn't a winning season. This isn't a season that we really care about. We're not trying to win a cup. We're not trying to make the playoffs. You don't like to burn a year of his rookie deal, but like, I don't know. Like, is it possible? Maybe. Depends on how these guys get along. It depends on how they play together. Ultimately, you have to make sure that whatever you do this season, you're putting as many talented players around Matvei Michkov as you can. You need to maximize what you can get out of him and get him set up for success in what will likely be a kind of not great season, if we're being fair. Now, I'm going to go over to some comments here. We're not done on Michkov, but I want to get over to the fine folks in the comments. Let's see. Mike Logia over on YouTube says, Press Row show in Allentown would have been epic because I live here. I would have liked to have done that. I don't know. I got to talk to some of these fine folks over at the Flyers. We got to figure out. I mean, there are so many things that we could be doing with them that would be so much better than what they're typically doing that I would be very happy to be a part of with the rest of the crew. There have been some missed opportunities already this summer. We will figure it out. Or we won't. And I'll just start calling them out on this show and maybe on Snow the Goalie until somebody listens. But like, there are things to be done. We have a whole season here of Michkov. I'm excited about it. I think everybody should be. Just don't be absolutely ridiculous with your expectations. Andrew Fawcett says, I love that LaPerriere Lappy telling everyone he was told to play Oshenko and Michkov together. William Gordon over on Facebook says, I'm a season ticket holder. I want to watch him play. Lenja Joseph says, Torts is just calculating how many games he'll put Michkov in Chateau Bow Wow. That's going to be a really fun thing to watch. Like, you know damn well that there's going to come a point in time where Torts is going to try to send a message to Michkov, and the fans aren't going to side with Torts. Like, this is going to be one of those times where, like, for as much as fans like to side with Torts when he's being a dick, if he's just a dick for the sake of being a dick, that ain't going to do it, guys. That's not going to work. The fans aren't going to be behind John Tortorella. There needs to be like a justified, like if he's going to bench him, there has to be a justified benching. And even then, I think that fans are going to be so far behind Michkov at this point. If you're Torts, like, you got to do the calculus on this one, buddy. This isn't benching Morgan Frost. It's not sitting Travis Sanheim in front of his loved ones when you're on the road in his hometown, and then you say you didn't know. Or Bobby Brink, where you did the same thing. Now, luckily for Michkov, the Flyers aren't playing in Russia, so Torts can't sit him in front of his family and friends. Now, in fairness, his mom and his brother, I believe, have now joined him in the U.S., so it is possible that they'll be at the games and that, in theory, Torts could still sit him in front of his family. But I digress. It won't be in his hometown. So maybe Michkov was playing like 4D chess this whole time. Let's see what else we have over here. Sean C says, I think the thing about him that excited me the most is that so far he doesn't seem to be buying into or relying on his own hype. He's willing to learn. I go back to, it was somebody on Chicklets who I think was a year ago or so kind of intimated that there were concerns around Michkov's character, and that's why teams didn't take him higher in the draft. But then there was a player in the KHL who actually released a statement and was like, no, this kid's great. Like, he just wants to win. He's not a complacent player, and he doesn't accept mediocrity. Sometimes it could rub somebody the wrong way because somebody who's been playing in a league longer might not like being held accountable, but like the kid is actively trying to make this team as good as he can. I'll take those kind of players every day. Let's see. Andrew Fawcett says he seems confident and cool, knows what he can do, and has a lot to learn as well. BJ says, I'm in on Michkovmania. Flyers need some juice with the Phillies' dominance and Eagles' expectations. 76ers arena drama makes it more fun to be a Phillies sports fan. We're going to get to that Sixers thing last because it's just what a crock of shit. What a crock of shit. Although it might not be. So then we still have to talk about it. Nico says he's going on a trip this weekend, which is going to make it to Allentown tonight. Again, Flyers are streaming it over on their website, so you can go watch it and see how it goes. William Gordon also asks over on Facebook, are the Flyers still looking at a trade to put a player or players next to Michkov? I don't think they're trying to trade to like bolster the lineup around him. Now, you can make the argument that that's kind of foolish. I would say that if you're like at this point, it doesn't make any sense to go out and acquire a player to put with Michkov. Like, you have two choices realistically. Well, there's a third, but it's a terrible idea. So you can put Michkov on the top line, which is going to be problematic because you just paid Travis Konechny a lot of money to be your highest paid winger. So you're probably not going to put him with Sean Couturier, even though there's a case to be made that if you put Michkov with Couturier, who's a 200-foot player, who's a great two-way player, you might end up unlocking the most out of Michkov, and you're setting him up for the best chance of success. That is true. You could put him with Morgan Frost, who's been in the coach's doghouse a lot. You could put him with Morgan Frost because they're both dynamic offensive players. There have been so many questions around Morgan Frost, though, as a two-way player, that it's going to shine a very bright light on Michkov. Like, if Frost isn't getting back and helping, and then Michkov isn't either, they're going to both end up in the Chateau Bow Wow. I'm not exactly sure that that's an advantageous position to put him in. Now, at the same time, just from a vision standpoint, just from the standpoint of looking at what can Frost do to set up Michkov and potentially turn him into a 20, 30 goal scorer, there's something to be said for that. Like, there's certainly something to be said for the dynamic that those two can have in the offensive end. It's just everywhere else. Your third option, which is a really bad one, is, put Scott Lawton with him. Why is it a bad idea? Because Matvei Michkov really shouldn't be on your third line, nor should Scott Lawton be your second line center. Scott Lawton should have been traded about 3 times by now. The fact that he's still here is just indicative of a team that overvalues a mediocre player who they view as a good leader, but who in a rebuild serves little to no purpose that they couldn't find elsewhere. And I say that with plenty, it sounds very disrespectful, but I don't mean it to be a disrespectful thing. Scott Lawton belongs on a team that has legitimate playoff aspirations. He could be helpful to that team. He could be a leader in the locker room for that team. He can be an all situations player for that team. He can be an excellent penalty killer on that team, but he doesn't need to be on this one. He doesn't need to be on this team that's in the midst of a rebuild, taking up a valuable spot that someone else could take. And again, if you're of the mindset that you can't play only young kids, you can't only play rookies, you can't only play second-year guys, that's fine. They went out and they got Garnet Hathaway, and they went out and got Ryan Poehling last year, and they brought them back again for this year. They could have theoretically gone out and found another one of those guys to replace some version of what Scott Lawton is. So to answer Williams' question, no, I don't think the Flyers are going to actively try to add to this team to pair someone with Michkov. I don't see them going out and making a trade for a center. Is it possible that they could trade away a Lawton or trade away a Frost at some point and bring back another center, a veteran who is going to instill all kinds of good values and good work ethic and a better understanding of the game? Sure. Is it possible that at some point the Flyers could look out to go target a Russian player to bring in to give Michkov another safety net, to give him someone else to speak to in his language, to kind of give that little bit of comfort while he's still learning the language? Remember, Fedotov is going to be here the whole season. That's the belief. Fedotov is your backup all year. Fedotov and Michkov both connect on the level that they're both Russian. They both played in the KHL. They both had an interesting situation getting over here. There are things to bond on. And we saw that picture on Instagram a couple weeks ago of them in a hot tub, I think in Colorado or something. So they're clearly getting together. They're clearly spending some sort of time together. Would have been nice if Alexei Kolosov had been, into getting to meet some of his potential future teammates, but he's over with Dynamo Minsk. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it plays, you'll see how it plays out. We'll go over here. Sean C says, make or break months for Frost. If you can't make it work with Michkov, who can you make it work with? That's fair and unfair. Again, so much of this comes down to what you think are the actual expectations for what Michkov is going to be. We talked about this on Snow the Goalie this week, which if you haven't subscribed or you haven't listened to it yet, please go do that. It's important. The sportsbooks right now have Michkov. Most of the sportsbooks, the legal online sportsbooks that you can find over wherever I do my writing, which you can find in a bunch of different places. Most of them have Michkov as the favorite to win the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year. Many of those sports books have Michkov at around minus 165 to score 20 goals, which had him in line with Tyson Forster. It's a probably pretty safe bet that Michkov nets 20. The way that the Flyers, Bunny made this point the other day, but the way that the Flyers tried to get Forster to that 20 goal mark last year, they force fed him the puck. Given what Michkov has been billed to be, pretty likely he scores 20. Where things get more interesting is around the 30 goal mark. He was plus 800 to score 30 goals, which means the odds makers don't view that as a very realistic proposition. If you're looking to find something where you can maybe make some money, that might be worth a look. You can go over to a Crossing Broad or another site that I write for and go sign up through those links and, help your guy out. But that's about it. There's nothing else in play here. If you're Michkov, I think 25 goals is probably a very nice rookie season. That might actually exceed expectations. There might be people who would be above and beyond, over the moon about Michkov if you can score 25. I just think that based on the fact that he is likely to be in the mix in the top 6 this year, there's a good chance that he can score 20 plus. If he doesn't, I'm not sounding the alarm bells. If he plays a full season and only ends up with 12 goals, then I would hope that he's been more of a facilitator and a playmaker on the wing, and that he's been impactful in some way on a power play, on like PP2 or something. Like that would be great. If he gets eaten up, if he gets swallowed up because he's a young player and he's not exactly huge, I'm not sounding the alarm bells next year. I would sound the alarm bells if the team continues throughout the season, if he struggles, to market him as the face of this and add more and more pressure to him. And then next offseason, they don't add anything to the team to help him out. Then I start to have some serious concerns and questions. But we are very far away from that. Andrew says, would rather see Paling with Michkov over Lawton. Paling at least has speed. And I think that might be fair. But again, like, is Paling a second line center? I would say no. This is where you like run into a real tricky situation. You know, like I do think that at some point you're going to see Michkov get first line minutes, or you're going to see Couturier get dropped to the second line. Like I think that you're going to see Michkov play with both of those guys, with Couturier and with Frost at different points in the year. And it's normal. Like Konechny occasionally gets bumped off the first line when he struggles, or when that top line isn't converting at a high enough rate. Don't be surprised if you see Michkov get some first line minutes. Do I expect it to happen early in the season? No. If Michkov on opening night is starting on your top line, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that says about Konechny. I don't know what that says about anybody else in the lineup. Sean also notes this is why the Lushenko 9-game cup of coffee should be a possibility. I think that it's in play, but it's very early. How Lushenko and Michkov look in rookie camp versus how they're going to look in training camp versus how they might look in the preseason are totally different things, right? But in theory, if you are a believer, if as an organization you believe that Lushenko is going to be a long-term piece, which they clearly do if they made him a first-round pick, you have to at least consider it. You have to at least consider seeing what these guys look like for 9 games and then send them down, and then maybe at the end of the year you bring them back up. I just don't know what that's going to look like. I will advocate that if Lushenko looks really good and if he and Michkov are playing well together and they do that 9-game stretch at the start of the season and they look great, don't send Lushenko down. There's no point. I get that it burns a year, but you know what? You're a rebuilding team. Figure it out. Give these guys a year at the NHL level to figure it out together. They probably won't, but they might. Maybe it gives them the ability then, if they see something good out of Lushenko, maybe it does give them in their mind, the justification to trade a Lawton or to trade a Frost. We know that they tried to trade Frost a bunch last offseason, offseason of 2023. We know that early in the season last year, there had been some conversations. We know that there were a couple of teams that were interested around the deadline. None of that came to fruition. We know that many teams have been interested in Lawton. Some have offered high picks in the past, and the Flyers have said, we don't want market value. We want above market value for Scott Lawton. Again, that's a bold strategy. I don't agree with it, but that's what they've said. Will Gordon says, who's our Flyers goalie today? Well, I don't know. It would have been Alexei Kolosov. That would have been great. But again, he can't be bothered to come over. I'm not sure who's going to be in net. I think Fedotov technically qualifies as a rookie. Are they going to put, I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they'll use like a baby filter on Cal Peterson's player picture, and they'll just put him in net really quick and hope nobody notices. Andrew Fawcett says that we should remove the redacted label from Carter Hart and put it on to Kolosov instead. I'm open to it. But if Carter Hart does end up getting into the U.S., which we talked about on Tuesday, then we have to reapply the redacted. We've got Nudie checking in over on Twitter, who says, I have to give you my Donald Brashear bobblehead fist statue for your desk. Yes, I would love a Donald Brashear bobblehead. Thank you. Absolutely. We interviewed Donald Brashear, by the way, last year during the alumni game. I don't think that ever made it to the Snow the Goalie channel. I'm going to add it, though. Donald Brashear is not, he doesn't love the movie Goon. It broke my heart. But I love Donald Brashear. Okay. I think that's it for Michkovmania right now. We'll see how the Flyers look tonight. Not that it really matters, but people are going to be very interested in seeing what Michkov looks like. Now, the final thing I want to get into today, and we're not spending a lot of time on it because it's not that it makes me angry, because it doesn't. I don't care that much about it, but it's something that, like, is annoying more than anything is the Sixers' potential arena. Now, there are a lot of conflicting feelings on whether or not 76 play should happen, whether the Sixers should get to do their downtown arena or not. I'll just tell you this. I have no dog in this fight. I don't care. If the people of Chinatown are really that upset about it and they can make a compelling case for why replacing a dead mall area with a potentially successful arena that could bring actual business into that area of the city is a bad thing. If they can make that case, by all means, allow them to make that case. From a neutral observer standpoint, I think that it's a pretty simple sell, or it should have been a simple sell. If the Sixers owners were really going to fund an arena themselves and not ask for public tax dollars, and they were going to bring new businesses into an area of the city that is effectively dead or useless, I think it's a great thing. Chinatown has the right to fight it. By all means, they can fight it. Billionaires are probably going to win. Some billionaire is going to end up winning. That is what we know. The Sixers are ultimately going to get something that they want. Now, I've long had this question of like, why the Sixers don't just look at the Navy Yard and build another exit off of 95 and just put a new stadium in the Navy Yard. It's close enough. It's adjacent to where the rest of the stadiums are. It would have a really cool sight line. It would be in an area that people are kind of used to traveling anyway. It doesn't dissuade you from wanting to go to games. It doesn't necessarily make public transit that much more complicated. To me, like, that's a simple place. I thought, and there had been some murmurs for a while that like maybe Comcast and the Sixers would look to build a new arena at the Navy Yard, a new cutting edge one. Well, the Comcast went out. They spent a ton of money renovating Wells Fargo Center from being what I considered a dump to not a dump anymore. It's actually a pretty damn nice arena. The behind the scenes stuff, like the elevator that's always broken to take you up to the press box, well, that's a totally different story. But from what you can see as a spectator and what you can see as a fan, like Wells Fargo Center is significantly nicer now than it used to be. Is it as nice as a built from scratch arena? Maybe not. But the upper concourse being wide open, like they have done great work there. Do I think the Sixers should want their own stadium or their own arena? Sure. Ultimately, like there's a very simple reason the Sixers want an arena. It's not because it's hard to work with Comcast. It's not because they've been dicked over. It's because Josh Harris and company want to be able to sell for a higher ROI. Like the reason the Sixers owners want an arena is so they can make more money when they go to sell the team eventually. Because your team is significantly more valuable if you also have real estate to sell with it, if you have an arena to sell with it. It's not like the Sixers are a valueless entity if you go to sell that team. If they make it to an Eastern Conference final, if they make it to an NBA Finals, if they win a championship, the value of the team is what it is. Without the arena, however, you won't get as much money. So, of course, they want a new arena. And maybe they do feel like at some point they've been dicked over by Comcast and by having to schedule around the Flyers and Disney on Ice and all the other things that go into Wells Fargo Center. Maybe they do want to control their own destiny. Maybe they do believe that. I don't know. But like just from a basic math perspective, you want to get a higher ROI, and you do that by having an arena attached to your team. It's very simple. Now, again, downtown arena, I don't care. Am I actively going to go out of my way to try to make it down to a downtown arena? I don't know. It better be simple. Where is the parking going to be? How far is the parking going to be? How safe is the area around the stadium going to be? That's it. If you can ensure me that there's parking and that it's going to be safe, cool. I'll take my family down. And if not, I'm not. I'm just a suburban guy. I'm a former coal region guy. I don't like the idea of potentially, walking multiple blocks through unsavory areas of the city to go to a Sixers game. I don't necessarily know if I want to ride the subway into the game. Does that make me an elitist? I don't know. I can tell you that when I go down to Wells Fargo Center or down to Citizens Bank Park or Lincoln Financial Field, I'm not actively worried about my safety. I just drive down there. I get very angry with the parking situation. I get very angry with how long it takes to get in and out. But like, that's the only frustration I really feel. That's it. But the reason that I bring up the Sixers arena is because it's not just that the mayor had an open forum meeting with people who are for and against the downtown arena, but because there was an idea put out there and there was a rendering put out there of what a Sixers arena in Camden could look like. Now, I remind you that Delaware had also kind of put out their own rendering of what an arena could look like. It's very unlikely the Sixers are going to move to Delaware. Camden, however, well, this is what an artist's rendering would look like. A Sixers arena on the Camden waterfront. Now, it looks beautiful. At first blush, this looks like a beautiful facility. You can build up the area with some high density, high expense housing. One of those places that are like 400 square feet, and they are proud to offer it to you at, $2,000 per month for rent. In this economy. So they could build up that whole area. They could add business. They could add outdoor seating and outdoor restaurants and all kinds of stuff. This is what this rendering looks like. Now, conceptually, is going to Camden that difficult? No. Is the idea of having to go to a Sixers game in Camden the worst thing in the world? No. But it just comes down to why. And now, as some people have pointed out with this image, and I'm going to see if I can zoom in on it over here or not. I don't know if it's going to, no, it's not going to let me do it. It's just going to mess with the rest of the page. I don't think I have a way to zoom it here. No. Okay. I think somebody else did, and I'll pull it up. But if you look over here, there's an area. Now, I don't know what this area is actually supposed to be. I don't know if these are supposed to be stairs. Not exactly sure what these are supposed to be. But it's fitting because it looks like an area where fans after the game can just go walk into the water. Perhaps after another second round exit. Maybe a first round exit. Here we go. Pull this up on the screen. Everybody has probably seen this by now and heard this joke and made this joke. But that doesn't mean that I am above making this joke. This is the part of the rendering that people found the funniest. You could just see that people can actively choose to walk into the water. Are people going to go swimming on the Camden waterfront in between getting down to Camden and going into the game? Lots of questions. Lots of questions. Not a lot of answers. Here's what I'll tell you. I don't really care where the Sixers play. They can play downtown. They can play at Wells Fargo Center. They can play in Camden. I'm still going to probably go to 1 or 2 games a year. I will still pack up the family to go take them down to a game or 2 a year. I don't really care. It doesn't make my life any less convenient as somebody who doesn't live in the city or particularly close to the city. The commute's going to stink no matter what. I'm going to have to sit in traffic no matter what. Just make it as easy as you can for people to get to your game, enjoy your game, and make sure that the team on the court performs. That's all any of us can ask for. And that's it. Genuinely, that's it. Do I think they'd be stupid to move to Camden? I do. I do think that they would take a hit. I think the Sixers owners, despite the fact that very few of them are local, I think Edelman has a general idea of how upset people would be. He went on Crossing Broadcast a few months ago and said that they could take his man card if the Sixers move out of Philadelphia. I think that it would be a big PR hit. I do think that they would do some significant damage to their brand in the minds of a lot of people if they move to Camden. I think that ultimately this is just going to be another one of those things that's used as a leverage play. And I think that's all this is. I think most of the discourse around the arena has just been so the Sixers can get their way. I think it's less likely now than I did before that the Sixers are going to re-up and stay at Wells Fargo Center. Is my hypothetical of a new arena at the Navy Yard possible? Could that be in play? Maybe. And you know what? Maybe that's ultimately what happens. Chinatown fights back enough. For whatever reason, the Sixers are told, like, it's a no-go. The 76th place thing is dead. Now you have to pick. Let's offer you this Navy Yard spot. We'll allow you to build everything up. And it's effectively an extension of the sports complex anyway. It's close enough. And maybe that's what the city ends up going with. Like, that's what they feel comfortable with. And they offer tax money to the Sixers to stay. And now it's no longer a totally privately funded arena. I don't know. I just don't know how much people care. Like, I think people do. I don't think that they're going to be happy if the Sixers move. But, like, ultimately, I don't know how much it matters. We'll go back out to the comments, and then we're going to wrap up today. I said it was going to be a short show, and I say this to myself a lot of times, even with Crossing Broadcast, and then it ends up becoming almost an hour, and here we are. Sean C says, I died laughing at one resident who passionately ranted, why are we doing this for a team that hasn't won a title in 40 years? It's true. Connor Allen says they'll do anything but make access to 95 better after events. Sean C says the funny part of this whole Sixers arena is that they'll probably be at the beginning stages of the post-Embiid era. Oh, they'll be way past it. By the time a new arena gets built, like Embiid will probably be done in the league. Like Tyrese Maxey will be on his he'll be at the end of the current max extension. Like I don't know what he'll be in his 30s, I guess, by the time this actually happens. Andrew Fawcett thinks that the Sixers are acting like an ungrateful child. Chris Freed says if the Sixers want to move to Camden, to a site north of the Ben Franklin Bridge, and the state of New Jersey wants to pay for it, bless them. Good luck with this. William Gordon says if the Sixers move to New Jersey, where most of the fans are from, because we grew up in Philly and moved, it'd be great. But the New Jersey Port Authority will, I think he means, will get my big bucks from the bridge tolls. It will hurt SEPTA. Andrew Fawcett simply asks, who the F wants to move to Camden? Sean C says, politics aside, the whole Camden thing reminds me of what the Warriors did a few years ago, though they just moved across the bay and are in the same state. Chester Waterfront or Camden Waterfront? Empty promises, says Sean C. T-Mac 803210 says, why a city like Philadelphia, says it in all caps, would ever turn down more than $1 billion in private investment in an attempt to rejuvenate an unused and poor area is beyond me. I agree with that. I do. Listen, there's a very simple thing to say here that no one will say publicly because you're going to get branded as something. Chinatown deserves to exist and should remain. And there have been case studies and there have been actual real world things where I think it was Nationals Park was built around Chinatown and it essentially wiped out Chinatown. You have to, as a city, work to figure out a way to make sure that doesn't happen. But you're not going into Old City and tearing down Independence Hall. You're not I don't know. That area of the city kind of stinks. There's nothing going on. Again, you're talking about using an unused area to build an arena that's going to bring in business. In theory, if there are protections, and I don't know what those protections are, how you do it. If there are protections for Chinatown, wouldn't it theoretically be able to drive more business to people who'd be like, oh, I've never been to Chinatown. Let's go to China. I don't know. But the area is kind of dumpy right now where they want to build the arena. Just let them build the arena. What are we doing? William Gordon says the city of Philadelphia has no clue how bad crime and traffic will be in downtown Philly. I mean, I think they have an idea of how bad crime is. Traffic's going to be bad no matter what. They're going to try to, have people go down and take public transit, use SEPTA to get to games in the city. They're going to have to almost overhaul the infrastructure. I don't know how that's going to work. T-Mac also says Navy Yard would be better than 76th place, but unfortunately don't think that's an option. And also says, bingo, that I understand this. So anyway, Sixers Arena, we'll see what happens. Michkovmania runs wild on Friday night. I'll be back here on Tuesday morning, 8:30. We'll be breaking down the Eagles and Falcons game. We'll see if anything else of interest happens. Obviously, the Phillies are kind of in that mode where they lead the NL East by a significant enough margin that you're no longer actively chewing down whatever's left of your fingernails, wondering if they're going to make the playoffs, if they're going to win the NL East, barring some cataclysmic collapse here over the next few weeks. They'll win the NL East. They are going to remain in contention for the top seed in the National League, potentially in all of baseball. We'll see where they're at. We'll kind of collect ourselves on Tuesday. So we'll be reacting to Michkov's first rookie game. We'll be reacting to the Eagles game. We'll be reacting to anything to do with the Phillies. We'll see if anything happens with the Sixers Arena and anything else that comes to mind. Tuesday on the Russ Joy Show, I want to thank all of you who tuned in live on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel or over on the Joy Media YouTube channel. And I will once again ask you, I am once again asking, if you can, even if you've been one of the wonderful people who've been commenting live, wait until the video kind of chills, the video ends, come back, leave a comment. It could be your favorite moment from the episode. It could be a question that you have for Tuesday's episode, whatever. Leave it in the regular comments section and make sure you hit that like button. And if you can, share the episode from YouTube to your favorite social media channel or to some friends, send it in a text, share the link directly from YouTube. All those things help. I'm going to continue to do this show. Show's growing. Slowly but surely, it's growing. The way that you can help is by sharing it. And by the way, if you listen in the podcast feed, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts, I want to thank you all as well. Do me a favor if you can, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify, leave a 5-star rating, and maybe even a review, write something out on Apple Podcasts, and I'll read it here on the show. So anyway, big thank you to everybody. I echo this statement. Have a great weekend. Fly Eagles, fly on Monday. I will talk to all of you Monday at noon on Crossing Broadcast. And of course, I'll talk to you all on Tuesday morning on the Russ Joy Show. Thanks again for joining me. I will talk to all of you very, very soon. Have a great week.